1. So let's get to it. I work at a pizza place, and I'm the primary closer, which means I get out very late, and do almost all of the work. So tonight I was about to cut my old manager's pizza. However, when I went to pick up the blade, it slipped and sliced my thumb. The cut was very deep, and blood was steadily running from the wound. The kicker, though, I hate blood. The very sight of blood makes my vision blurry and makes me see stars, and then sometimes faint. My buddy knew this and covered for me while I stepped outside and sat down for a good few minutes and recovered. I got back inside still feeling woozy and finished my job. After work I was driving to my girlfriend's house, and it started to storm really bad on the highway. There was thick traffic. Everyone slammed on their brakes and put their caution lights on. I slammed on my brakes and started sliding from all the water. Needless to say, adrenaline was pumping, and I will admit it scared me. I finished driving the next 10 minutes at no visibility, until I got to my exit, where it suddenly stopped raining. I felt relieved, as if I could breathe again. After 2 miles, and I would be in my girlfriend's apartment and home free. I pulled in and parked in my favorite spot, the handicap unloading zone, like a dick, and got out of my car and started walking towards my girlfriend's house. This is where things started getting bizarre. I felt as if I was being watched, but couldn't find out from where. I'm looking into my girlfriend's apartment via the sliding door facing the street, and I could see someone standing there. They were my girlfriend's height and build, but they were wearing what seemed to be a blue t-shirt and red sweatpants. My girlfriend would never wear a blue t-shirt, and I do know she wears red pants, but as I was walking up, I was watching this figure. Whoever, whatever it was, seemed to be moving, like trying to walk but not getting very far across the room. Almost like a character in a video game glitching. All the body parts seemed to be moving, abnormally, in different directions, but it wasn't fluid like human movement. There is no better way to explain the movement than sort of like a wacky waving inflatable tube man being filmed with a time-lapse camera. That is exactly what it looked like, but with legs, as if it were trying to move. It made my blood run cold. Now, I vape. Yes, it is related to the story, stay with me. But as I hit my e-cig and blew a cloud in front of my vision, after it rains the clouds are thicker, it seemed to disappear when the smoke cleared. I thought I was just seeing shit and continued to walk in. I opened the door and walked inside, walked past my girlfriend's mom's room, who was snoring, and walked into my girlfriend's room where she was dead asleep, wearing a grey t-shirt and a pair of short purple gym shorts with a red stripe. Whatever I saw was not her. I crawled in bed with her and told her about my day as normal. Gave her a massage and scratched her neck and whatnot. When 10 minutes later, after I heard her mom's door open, you can see her door from across the hall. There were no lights on, so all I saw was feet and legs walking into the kitchen living room area, where I just saw that weird aforementioned thing. The kitchen light turned on, and I heard the sink turn on as well. I thought, oh, her mom is just getting a glass of water, no biggie. Also released from her mother's room was her dog, Tiny Thing. Jumped up on the bed with us and tried to cuddle up, and steal my girlfriend's back scratches. After a few minutes I noticed that the sink didn't stop, and my girlfriend's mom did not return to her room. I let it run for about 5 more minutes, as I didn't want to make her mom feel weird for getting a pot of water to start boiling at 1 a.m. Whatever. I don't know, I just didn't want to bother her. So getting annoyed that the sink was still on, my girlfriend asked me to go check out what she was doing. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway, that was now being partially illuminated by the kitchen light, and noticed something that made my blood run cold. As I made my way past her mother's room, I could still hear her snoring. I turned around and peeked in her room to find her wrapped up in blankets, with the other dog cuddled up on her neck. I turned around thinking, oh shit, this is where I die. if I were watching this as a movie, I would scream, "Turn around, bitch," and run back into the other room. "Shut the door, bitch. Go, go." But for some reason, I decided to walk into the kitchen. I looked around and found a normally messy kitchen, but the faucet was on full blast. I have this feeling a lot when I know I'm either walking into something paranormal, or I know there's a spider near me. It's the same feeling. I reluctantly walked into the kitchen and turned off the faucet. The faucet is now off. I thought, mission accomplished. Now get the fuck out of there, but looked around just to see if I could see my glitchy friend again. But it was nowhere to be found. As I turned my head, something weird happened. It was as if I entered a cave, or put on noise-cancelling earphones. I could no longer hear a single thing. Not the neighbor's washing machine, not the refrigerator, not the rain outside, not the AC unit outside, not the lights, or my girlfriend's snoring mother. It's like all sound around me just got hit by some universal mute button. I have never heard anything like that silence in my life. I still couldn't see anything. So I decided that whatever it was wanted to fuck with me, and not anyone else. So I woke my girlfriend back up, got her to lock the door behind me, left, went home, and started typing this post. Sure, it's a long post, but what do you think? Did something see me as weak from being scared during the day and decide to fuck with me? Was I just seeing this stuff because I was already in a heightened sense of alertness? Do paranormal things take advantage of you because you have been scared earlier in the day? And lastly, would being scared allow you to look for the paranormal easier? Or would it just complicate things? 2. It's difficult to know where to begin. But I guess I'll begin by saying that I've been working away from home in the same location for the last month or so, and going home on the weekends. Each week I stay in the same hotel, and for that matter in the same room each time I check in. What's been bothering me is that ever since I set foot in this town, I felt a general sense of dread, like I'm being watched by something predatory. And recently at night, I've started experiencing vivid, realistic nightmares, most of which start off with me waking up in my hotel room to witness a shadowy figure right next to my bed. It emits some kind of clicking sound, similar to the predator in the movie franchise of the same name, before screaming and lunging at me. From there it devolves into watching my family members be slaughtered, or having them watch me be engulfed in flames chanting, "Daddy is burning, Daddy is dying." Now, if it was all just bad dreams, I'd have no reason to post here. I could easily write this off as working too hard away from home, coupled with the fact that I suffer with anxiety and depression, both for which I am medicated. But today, as I went to my pickup to start work, I was greeted by an upsetting sight. Bleached animal bones had been scattered all around my pickup, in a virtually perfect circle. I was also confronted by one of the hotel's other tenants, who pointed out the pickup, complaining that the alarm kept going off at night, keeping him awake. What's strange about that is my pickup is a very old model, and does not have an alarm system. I am fairly certain that I'm not completely crazy, but I'm genuinely unnerved by what's going on. Perhaps I'm just adding 2 and 2 and getting 5, but I don't know. I more wanted to get this off my chest and talk to some like-minded individuals that wouldn't just completely discount me as some sort of raving lunatic or impromptu internet storyteller. Also, I wanted to ask if anyone has heard of anything like this, and if it has a name that I could research. Thanks, guys. 3. Hey, so I'm not really a stern believer in the stereotypical supernatural. While I do believe there is so much more out there than we could possibly know, I pay no attention to ghost stories or haunted objects and the like. I also believe to have never had an experience of the paranormal kind, Until last week, that is. Let me explain. I am a 24-year-old adult, and I'm still somewhat reasonably afraid of the dark, and especially dark hallways. When I was a kid, I think I was 9 or 10 at the time, I got down with the flu, experiencing the typical symptoms like strong headaches, vomiting, high fever and the like. From my bed I have a perfect view of our entrance hall, the front door and the man-sized mirror we have at the right side of it. So when I woke up, that's where my eyes went first. There in front of the mirror stood, well, something. I can still remember it vividly, a huge, I think 2 meters or more, shadowy figure, and it looked completely humanoid, except from something like a silhouette. It was as if it was regarding itself in the mirror. At one point, it apparently noticed me and turned, slowly beginning to walk towards my bed. I couldn't make out a face, only a black void. I was terrified at that point. I closed my eyes for a few seconds while hoping it to be a dream. When I opened them again, it was still there, crouching, looking me dead in the eyes. At that point, I pinched my eyes hard and kept them like that for a while. When I opened them, it was gone. No trace whatsoever. While absolutely traumatizing to me for some reason, I brushed it off as me being delirious. Until last week. That night I had my first experience of what people call sleep paralysis. I woke up in the dead of night and couldn't move. Couldn't talk or scream or do anything. I felt like my chest was being constricted and had trouble breathing. It was a terrifying experience. One that I hope will never repeat itself. During this phase of sleep paralysis, however, I saw something standing inside of my room. It looked exactly like that shadowy figure, which appeared to me in my childhood, in the corner of my room. I have no idea which way it was facing, but I had a feeling it was looking at me. I could only lay there. I think I didn't blink for a good 30 to 40 seconds. When I finally did blink and looked towards the corner again, the figure had vanished, together with that constricting feeling. I could move and breathe normally again. Quite frankly, I was scared shitless. I know, hallucinations during sleep paralysis are a common thing. Maybe it was just my imagination. Then again, what exactly did I experience in my childhood, though? I already looked up shadow people on the internet, and found a few fascinating things. I thought posting my experience on this subreddit would be interesting. Leslie, thank you for taking the time to read my post. 4. This is one of my personal stories. It's a bit long, and if you doubt this ever took place, my sister even did a vlog about all this on YouTube. My family and I were moving around a lot, still are, and we wound up in North Carolina. We went to 3 different houses down there. The first one was in Statesville, the second in Asheville, and the last was in Granite Falls. We lived on Peachtree Lane. All the people around us were friends and family. They hated us since we were from the north, from Michigan. And they didn't want us there at all. From the first night, I didn't like it. I was nearly 10 at the time. The dogs kept barking every night up until we left. I went to school, made friends, and came back home. One day when I got off the bus, I saw there was a state police officer behind us. I went to the mailbox to see if there was anything, but before I could, the bus drove away, and 8 of the little rats from across the street called. Chihuahuas ran over barking, snarling, and trying to bite me. Luckily, there was always someone to get me off the bus. Today was my sister, and as I ran past her, she managed to get them away. The whole time it happened, the police officer didn't give a single fuck. I know that wasn't paranormal, but it was part of when I lived there. Now to the paranormal. It had been 3 months since we moved into that house, and strange stuff was happening every day. One night I thought it was a weird dream, but it turned out to be true. My parents said that I was speaking in tongues, sat up in my bed, pointing at the door with my eyes in the back of my head. They told me the next day that had happened, and I did my best not to sleep from thereafter. My sister was always paranoid that the neighbours would try to break in and kill us, after the neighbour on the right side of our house was walking down the street with a shotgun and threatened my dad. Luckily, my sister had a collection of rusty tools and weapons that my dad was unloading from the van. He had pulled out her rusty scythe and told the guy the same thing he told my dad. "You see this?" was what the guy said. My dad said the same thing, but shook the scythe at him a little. He just walked away and kept looking back at him. Another thing that happened the day we moved out. I had woken up early and turned on the light, but the power was out, so I went to tell my sister, and she said that Mom and Dad had left to have the power turned off. This was a weekend, so my sister actually slept for once. She'd always sleep after I went to school, due to her paranoia at night. After realizing that they'd easily be gone for a few hours, I grabbed my DS and went to my parents' bedroom to lay on their bed and play while my sister went back to sleep. Now, my sister was around 21 at the time, so if I needed anything, I'd ask her. I don't know why I even did decide to play video games in my parents' room, but I did. After a while, I started hearing whispers from all around me, and it even sounded like it was in my head. I paused the racing game I was playing and looked up, and out the open door into the kitchen, there was a tall black figure standing there. Now, it was the time of day where sunbeams would come through the skylight, but when they did, they went right through the figure. He looked like he was a shadow, but the right side of his shoulder and face looked like it had been shot with a shotgun. Strings of flesh strung the hanging side of his face to his skull. He was only different shades of black, but I knew what I saw. I realized the whispering around me and in my head was him. He was begging for help in a raspy voice, as if it were coming and going with wind. "Help me," was what he was saying. At this point, I was frozen with fear. I wanted to scream, but felt if I did, I would have died. He turned to his left and walked forward past the door and in the direction of the microwave. Once I no longer felt frozen, I took a deep breath and was shaking with fear still. I don't know why, but I got up and decided to see if he was still there. Thank the stars he wasn't. I looked from the kitchen area over to the small dining area next to it, which was in my left and had a fireplace next to where my rabbit hutch was. I walked over to the cage, still shaking, and opened the door to see my black and white rabbit sitting in the very back of her cage, also shaking with fear. Her name was Cuddles, pronounced Cuddles. I reached in to pet her. Once I did, she calmed down and hopped closer to me, so I could pet her more and easier. After a few minutes of silence, I spoke. "You saw it too, huh, Bunny?" She blinked and her ear twitched. I decided to close her door and ran, full fucking bolted into my sister's room. I threw her door open and woke her up, crying as I told her what had just happened. Eventually I calmed down and fell asleep at the foot of her bed like a dog, which was how I slept for some reason when I was little. Hours later, our parents got back, and we told them what happened. They had a moving truck, and they were loading stuff into it so we could leave that day. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but while they were packing and nearly done, my sister and I heard something. It sounded like a guy in the house going, "Hello? Hello?" We looked around but found no one. Scared shitless, we left. Years have passed since all that happened. My sister told me details that I never knew even happened. Apparently I wasn't the only one who saw shit like that. My sister heard child's feet running through the house, not mine. And my father actually heard chanting in the forest behind her house, as well as what sounded like cows being slaughtered and sacrificed. I still have nightmares of that place, despite it being so long ago. You would have to knock me out, tie me up, and drag me back to that place. I never want to go back. 5. I'm in my late 20s, and this happened almost 3 years ago. I had recently graduated with a bachelor's degree and had landed a really fancy job at an international fashion house. Since this was my first job, I could not believe my luck. It was exactly what I wanted, and I was doing very well for people my age. I was happily single and independent, and thought I could finally come out of under my extremely protective parents' wings and do something with myself. That's when I decided to rent an apartment closer to my place of work, which also happened to be in the most affluent part of town. Being very close to my parents, and regardless of them having their own double-story house, I urged them to move into this spacious 3-bedroom apartment with me. My younger brother, who was also looking for a job at the time, came along too. The location of my new apartment was fantastic. It was situated right in the middle of expensive clothing stores, exotic coffee houses, and attracted young people belonging to the upper middle and high class from all over the city. I reiterate this only to show that it was not a bad neighborhood at all, and crime was virtually non-existent, as is the norm with areas where 95% of the population owns chauffeurs and armed bodyguards. Also, my apartment was on the 3rd floor, next to another one that housed our very sweet, harmless neighbors. So the landlord agreed to give me a very good price, and I, along with my family, happily moved into the new apartment, and life was perfect. We as a family would often dine out and spend time together just relaxing. All seemed fine for the first few months. My brother also found a job. So it was the 3 of us, me, my dad, and my little bro, who went to work, while my mother stayed at home. We had a maid too, who looked after the house, so Mom essentially did not have to do anything, except just chill and go shopping with her sisters, who she was very close to. I can't pinpoint a time when it all started, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night one time, and having this dreadful feeling of someone being in my room. My closet was huge, and had a lot of shelves, all of which had sliding doors. The top shelf, however, was the biggest, and had been open from the time we moved, although having a sliding door like the rest to close, and big enough to easily accommodate a person as large as 8 feet, as long as it hunched over. I remember looking up and seeing a skinny shadow crouched over in the top part of my ceiling-high closet. I don't know how to explain it except that there was no features to it, and it had an outline of a scrawny man. My bedroom was fairly big, and I had my own private bathroom, so in the nights, I would usually sleep with the bathroom light on, while the rest of the room would be pitch dark. I don't know how long I stared at it blankly, but I remember telling myself that I was imagining things, and slept with the light on in my room. As soon as I turned the light on, there was nothing in the shelf, except for a dark, hollow space. This must have happened so many times that I told my mother to get the top shelf closed by my brother when he came back home, because it was freaking me out, without telling her much else. The ceiling of my room was so high that my fairly tall brother needed a huge ladder to get to the top shelf and slide the door close. I breathed a sigh of relief once he closed it, because even if it was a figment of my imagination, I did not want to keep waking up in the middle of the night to see a dark shadow huddled over in my closet. Soon after, I began seeing a tall black shadow at the foot of my bed almost every night. It was the same every night. I would wake up in the middle of the night sweating profusely, with a figure which seemed hooded to me for some reason, by my bedside. Sometimes it would be closer to me and bending over. I would freak out, make myself sit upright, gather the courage to grasp across the room to flick the light switch on, and just like that, it would disappear. I chalked it to my imagination and never spoke a word of it to anyone, jokingly telling myself during the day that I needed to stop reading up so much on the supernatural, while dreading nightfall, when the threat seemed much more than just my imagination. One night we all headed out for dinner. Or did we go to a wedding? I can't recall which exactly. And came back in the wee hours of the morning, as was common in our household on the weekends. As soon as I entered my room and turned on the lights to change and get ready for bed, I saw a word carved right under the light switch which read, Abinash. Needless to say, I realized that this was just too real and quickly called my parents and brother into my room. They all saw what seemed like someone had scratched a word on the wall using their nails or something sharp. But it looked rugged and totally something carved using nails. It was deep too, and even though we tried, we couldn't reproduce it at all. My rational dad just got quiet and began thinking of a reasonable explanation to tell me, and my easy-to-scare mother, but couldn't come up with anything. All of us had our keys to the house, and we were all together at the same time, and there was no way anybody could have gotten into the house. As I mentioned earlier, my apartment was on the 3rd floor, so really difficult to climb up and barge into through the one and only balcony, which was locked as always. The only other entrance into the house was through the main door, which was followed by another iron grill gate. Moreover, the building had a main door that was always locked, and even if anybody attempted to get in, the guard would undoubtedly see it, and most definitely call the cops. And like I said, it was a crowded, lively neighborhood, and there is no way someone could have busted into our house, at least without our always awake neighbors noticing. While everyone was still discussing the weirdness of the situation, still dressed with their shoes on at 2 a.m. in the morning, I decided to quickly Google the word to find out what it meant. I had kept myself somewhat composed until then, but as I saw the first entry that turned up, I turned as pale as a ghost. It said, and I still remember it as clear as day, Abinash, Hindu, male name, that which cannot be destroyed, immortal. I cannot begin to explain how I felt that moment. I started fearing for my life and refused to go into my room, and spent the night in my brother's room where I slept the next week. Dad immediately scratched the name out with his car keys, and in the morning, I put a dumb sticker on top of it, so I could not be reminded of it every time I went into my room to pick up even the smallest of things. Still, it needed immense courage for me to even go into my room, for even the bathroom. I had countless sleepless nights after that day, and so did the rest of the family, although all 3 of us continued to go to work. The next morning my mom discovered some markings all over the wall near the main door, this time in pencil, similar to the ones kids usually use to mark their heights. The markings ranged from 50 centimeters to over 250 centimeters. The handwriting seemed different for each number, while the one for the tallest measurement matched the one in my bedroom. My dad tried to dismiss it by saying it was nothing, and that those marks must have always been there, but deep down, we all knew that was impossible because 1, the landlord had gotten the entire house freshly painted for us when we moved in, and 2, despite being in such an obvious place, we never saw the marks before. Also, the name was right underneath the light switch in my bedroom, which I used at least a dozen times every day, and it never appeared until that one night. My mother called her sister the same morning, who would come and spend the day with her every day while we had gone to work for the next 3 days. On the 4th day, she prayed in my bedroom along with some of her more religious sisters. I moved back into my room a few days later, and I never saw the black shadow again. Sometimes I wonder if there was any connection between the shadow crouched up in my closet and the one bending over me and the name scratched on the wall. On asking the neighbors about the previous tenants, they told us absolutely nothing noteworthy, except that the apartment had been empty for quite a while before we moved in. My mom and her sisters believed that whatever it wasn't attached to the house, but to me, since no one else felt anything ever. We lived there for another year, after which I moved out of the country to pursue a master's degree, while my parents went back to their old house. Looking back, I can't believe that I spent hundreds of nights that I did in that room in pitch darkness, with sometimes a tiny ray of light coming from the bathroom, with the certainty that I would wake up in the middle of the night and find a crouching shadow in my sky-high closet. Even if all that was my imagination or sleep paralysis, the name Abinash scratched on my wall, and the height measurements were there for all to see. Everyone from my friends to relatives saw them, and questioned how we had still not run away from the house. Before typing this up, I googled the name once again, after all these years, and this time, after some digging, found another more morbid meaning. Abinash, eternal who has no death. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here. Thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, Episode 1. Well, hopefully this new format works a lot better than the old one. Not that the old one didn't work, it just meant videos were a bit shorter. Okay, on with the news. What is there? Oh yes. Even though I had actually cancelled my personal Facebook account, scheduled it for deletion, I discovered it would actually make more sense to cancel the cancellation than off that set up a Hellfreezer Facebook page, because they're kind of dickish about you using your real name, so you need an account with your real name to set up like a fan page. So I have set up a Hellfreezer page on Facebook, which will hopefully make it easier for you guys who don't want to have to come to YouTube every time for videos, or maybe you're just not getting notifications, because I am bloody certain that's happened, because as a rule, whenever a video, it dips in views, I can pretty much put that down to notifications not being delivered. So we've got that there as another option. There's also Twitter. I'll include the links for both these things down there. So, and as always, if you're liking a video and sharing it on Facebook, that's a massive help to me. Retweeting things on Twitter, again, massive help to me. It helps spread the word. My videos gets me more views, which in turn gets me more subscribers, right? And the annoying thing about the way YouTube work is, it used to be, you'd be lucky enough, you'd be a small channel, you'd get featured on the front page, and that would help you get your numbers up. But they don't really do that these days, which is understandable, because it is all about bringing in the advertising in that. And bigger channels get more advertising bucks. So that unfortunately means smaller channels like myself, and even at almost 9,000 subscribers, I am still a smaller channel. It means we don't get the exposure perhaps we'd enjoy, perhaps we'd like to have. So it's a bit more of an effort, not impossible, it's just more of an effort to get up there. So once you have bigger numbers, you get more views, then you get more subscribers, and it's kind of a snowball effect, I guess. Does that make any sense? It did in my head. I'm not sure if it came out of my mouth that way. Okay, anyway. Let me think. TIFU tomorrow. I got 5 for that. I may actually have 6, but I'm going to do 5 in the video, and we'll save one. That'll get me started for the next one. TIFU tomorrow. Then next week, we'll see what next week is when we get there. Okay. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and for listening to me ramble, and take very good care of yourselves.